Hi everyone, welcome to part 2 of my tarot numerology analysis of T.Rex's final show. Please watch part 1 of this analysis before beginning watching this video, because otherwise you're just really not going to understand much of what's going on in this video. I'm going to pick up right where I left off. I said that I was going to pull a clarifier for the Tower card to give us a little more insight as to why he was feeling the way he was feeling when he went on stage at Grona Lund. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, I hope. And I managed to pull the High Priestess and the Knight of Swords. Now, I was only going to pull one card, but when I shuffled, two of these popped out at the same time. And whenever that happens, that's the universe's way of saying, take it. You know, you need both of these cards. So I ended up pulling two cards that could not be more different from one another. The High Priestess, first of all, she's the one that came out first. She is actually quite a lot like the Queen of Cups that I covered earlier. And she is very intuitive. She is an energy of acceptance, of taking no action, actually sitting still and opening up her mind and heart to her higher voice. She listens to her intuition. She understands that there is the spiritual truth that we're all supposed to be living by. She doesn't turn off her mind and heart or close her eyes to what's going on in the physical world. She knows very well, but she also knows it's an illusion and that she needs to trust in the unknown. She's very grounded in the unknown. She's very comfortable there, and she's very willing to accept the insight that she gets from her intuition. So she is seeking the balance that comes from that. Balance between the light and the dark, the sun and the moon, you know, the material world and the spiritual world. And that is what Mark was doing in his life. I think at this time he was beginning to do that. And he began the day that way, with that Queen of Cups energy that I covered in the first video. If you recall, this lady right here that I covered in the first video, that was the mood that he woke up in, that very loving, serene, sort of spiritual mood. And by the time he took the stage a few hours later in the day, that had definitely taken a downturn. You know, I think it's pretty inevitable that would happen, because too often, you know, it's very hard to begin your day in perfect clarity and then manage to maintain that, you know, when you're out in the world and you're dealing with people, you know, and their nonsense and, you know, the world's nonsense. You know, it all becomes one big sort of vibration soup in a way. And it's hard sometimes to maintain your balance and all of that. And the High Priestess that shows up here as a clarification sort of tells me that he was really working to maintain that, but he was fighting his ego, which is shown here by the Knight of Swords. The Knight of Swords is unlike the High Priestess, you know, who sits still and who is in a receiving mode. The Knight of Swords is action oriented, is very based in the mental world. And he's not somebody who listens to his feelings, you know, or sits around waiting for, you know, some sort of spiritual sign or spiritual insight, although he probably should. Um, he's very intelligent. He does have great ideas. To his credit, he is often right about a lot of things. He personally thinks he's right about everything. And it almost looks as if the Knight of Swords is charging towards the High Priestess, almost trying to get rid of her or something. But if you look at her, she doesn't look too intimidated, as far as I'm concerned. And so I really feel that it was almost as if somebody dropped off the Queen of Cups in a dark alley or something. Or it's like he began the day, and he managed to get into this perfect state, and hours later, his inner voice was battling, the outer influences, and his own personal ego. And that sort of resulted in a tower moment, or a tower sort of mood where he didn't feel like anything was stable. And if you look at the Knight of Swords here, this is what's really odd. If you zoom in on that, I'll try to zoom in on it in a second. But if you look at the reins of the horse, they have little M's on them, which I find really unusual. I think it's really crazy that I would draw this card. Let me see if I can get in there. One moment. Okay, I zoomed in a little closer on the Knight of Swords here. He, if you notice, the reins of the horse have a total of 8, what appears to be 8 M's all the way across it. Now, obviously, I think that stands for, in this case, it stands for Mark, in the context of this particular reading. And it's so crazy that there would be 8, because 8 is a very significant number for Mark in numerology. I would like to pause for a second from the tarot part and sort of jump over to numerology for just a bit and explain a little about the 8 and Mark. Now, in numerology, again, like I said in the first video, there are only 9 primary numbers that are dealt with, 1 through 9. That's it. With the exception of the master numbers, which is a completely different subject for a completely different time. But basically 1 through 9. When you're born, you have certain numbers in your name and in your birth date. And oftentimes you're missing 1 or 2 of those numbers. Now, Mark was missing the number 8 from his name and from his birth date. And when you're missing a number, that is called a karmic lesson. And so that means that is a number vibration that is important for you to deal with during your lifetime in order to gain experience from it. The essence of the number 8 is all about power, wealth, money, abundance, success, worldly success, excellence, achievement. It's a very visionary number too. People who have the number 8, they're very powerful, they're very capable. They look like they know what they're doing. You look at them and you can, and you're around them and you can sense their power, you can sense their ability, and they usually have a lot of charisma, because the 8 centers around money so much. These people are often very well dressed. They often look the part. And again, like I said, this number was missing from his name. But, and it wasn't in his birthday either. It couldn't be found there. And, but it is in one place. It's in his habit challenge. Now, your habit challenge is the grand total of all the letters in your name. And he was born with the name Mark Feld. So that gave him a habit challenge of 8 because there are 8 letters in his birth name. Now, your habit challenge is it's exactly what it sounds. It's a behavior that you express habitually, but it's a challenge because you have a very hard time finding balance with it. So you're either expressing it at an extreme of positivity or an extreme of negativity. And as we all know, as Mark was growing up, he was very focused on being the star. Even though he wasn't a world superstar yet, he was the star of his neighborhood, of his school. He dressed very nice. It was very important for him to wear his suits and things, when he was a young teen and preteen. And he wanted to look the part, and he strived to be a success from a very young age. And even though he was missing that 8 from his name altogether, he had it as a habit challenge, which was to his benefit, to a certain degree. But again, like I said, he had a hard time finding balance with that. So a lot of times he went overboard. Maybe, sometimes he was a little too, maybe a little too confident, maybe a little too aggressive with people, maybe came off a little too strong, maybe dressed the part a little too much, just kind of went over the top with things. As far as money is concerned, he might have spent a little too much money, or, made a lot of money but didn't know what to do with it, that kind of thing. And that was just in his early life. Now, as time went on, as we know, he changed his name from Mark Feld to Mark Bolan. And by the way, when you change your name in life, it does change your number vibrations a little bit. You can never ever change your birth name vibrations. You'll never get rid of that, even if you do change your name legally. But if you change your name legally, you can sort of add on a layer to what's already there. And so when he began using the name Mark Bolan as a professional name, he added the essence of 8 to his soul and personality. Now, I'm not going to get too far into his personal numerology because this is primarily a tarot reading with some number emphasis. But when he was born under the name Mark Feld, he was born with the soul of a nurturer. If Mark loved you, you were family, whether you were related or not, basically. And in contrast to that loving, domestic, creative soul, which, by the way, was only really apparent to his close loved ones, he was also born with the personality of a natural-born leader, someone full of drive and courage and ambition, and that part was apparent to everybody because your personality is what you show the world, and what you put out in the open for everybody to see. Your soul, on the other hand, is something you keep a little more hidden. And, his nurturing side, his desire for balance and harmonious surroundings, may not, and his devotion to family and friends may not have been apparent to everybody. Now, when he took on the name Mark Bolan, he added a layer of 8 to both his soul and his personality. So he began life with a heart's desire to care for his family and to love his family and friends and to nurture. and to have domestic balance and harmony. And with an 8 layer added to that, that also added a desire to achieve success, to make money, to be a successful person. And when he added 8 to his personality, he was already displaying the traits of a leader, but this also added the appearance of somebody who was already very successful. You know, somebody could look at him and see his charisma, see his talent, see somebody who had what it took to get anywhere. And he managed to do that. You know, he pulled off that 8 vibration a lot, unfortunately. That doesn't change the fact that he wasn't born with it. So he still struggled with that number quite a lot. And it is well documented that his finances weren't good and when he died. And he was able to make money, but he wasn't really able to manage it too well. So all in all, I think that he was really opening up to changing his ways and sort of changing the way that he went about life, you know, maybe with a little less ego and with a little more of a desire to listen to that higher voice. And I think he knew intuitively that's where the truth was. And his higher self was saying all was well. You know, you're exactly where you need to be right now. You're supposed to be doing this show. You're supposed to be doing what you're doing today. It is all going to lead to good things. Whereas his ego was fighting that. His ego had no patience and was like, no, you know, this is a waste of time. You know, this is a downgrade. This isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. You know, it's hard to want to be at A, but want to be at Z. You know, that's very hard for the ego. But, you know, the high priestess, you know, represented his higher voice, you know, and Mark's higher self was very patient, you know, and he knew that he needed to go through the fire, do some things, take these little practical steps, and they would lead eventually to where he wanted to go. And he knew that, but it would take the patience in order to do that. Okay, and these 3 cards actually cover the final 3 questions that I asked the universe when I was shuffling the tarot cards. The next question that I asked was, what was Mark's mood when he was coming off the stage that day? And I managed to pull the Page of Pentacles here on the far left here. Now, immediately that he felt reborn when he came off stage. That is completely different energy from the tower. He felt reborn, rejuvenated. That tower had come falling down. It was a brand new day. He had a childlike spirit about his outlook for the future. Notice she's holding that shiny pentacle in her hand. She's facing forward. She's facing the future. The card is full of green, you know, and green always represents healing. It represents prosperity. It represents good health. And I think that he was very focused towards the future. He saw his future coming off the stage with fresh eyes. He was optimistic about what he had to work with and where he was going and how to carry out his plans. You know, when you're an adult, when you're older and tired and more jaded, you're not too excited about things that as a child used to thrill you. But I think that when he came off stage, he had that spirit of rejuvenation and that spirit of being excited again over the simple things, and I think he was really looking forward to the future, and he had a new optimism. The middle card, right there, is the Four of Swords. Now that card pertains to the question I asked the universe, how did Mark feel about starting his TV show? What was his general mood going into his TV show? And when I pulled this card, I will confess, I chuckled, because this card is all about rest and rejuvenation. It's about taking a break, basically. And the card is a 4 card. And the one thing that stood out was the 3 swords that are hanging on the back wall over there, while the 4th one lays on top of him. Now, to me, this represents that what immediately I thought of was he was going into the Mark show feeling like he was taking a little bit of a creative break, because the 3 represents creative self-expression. And notice he's got the 3 swords hanging up on the wall, not in use. And I think that he was excited about going into the show in a way. There was optimism there, there was passion there, and some drive. But he was going into it with a sense of, rather than being the leader or being the main creative force, he was the one that was going to be more of a student this time around. He was going into it with the idea that he was going to learn about being on television, about how TV shows are made, and he was offering his image, to this TV show. And I'm sure he had creative insight, of course he did, I'm sure. But he wasn't the main creative force in this particular endeavor. It was going to be more of a learning experience. And the figure's sort of laying there, at rest, but sort of praying, like, I hope this works out, I hope it goes well. I sort of get that feeling from this card. So I think that he was going into the show with cautious, optimism, but more as a student, more as somebody who's going to, show up, every day with the discipline, to learn something a little new. And the final card there on the far right, the 3 of Pentacles, I asked what was his outlook for the rest of the year. And it's pretty straightforward, just very joyful continuation of steady work, pretty much. And that's what that card really pertains to. He was picking up his creative reins again. Again, it resonates to a 3. So again, that's creative self-expression. That card generally is all about teamwork. This is kind of an unusual tarot deck. Usually the 3 of Pentacles shows a figure working with a team of people in the picture. However, in this particular picture, it's just one man, and he's got his pentacles and also feathers, which is an unusual visual. But I think that what this represents is he was working as a team with his spirit team. I think that he was going to focus on his work, throughout the rest of the year. He planned to do that just like he always did, but with more of an emphasis than ever before on listening to that higher voice and communing with those his intuitive nudges, pretty much. And he was going forward into the rest of the year with a mindset of healing, with a healthier way of doing things, a healthier mindset, and sort of joining the material world with the spiritual world more than he had in the past. And it also makes sense given what his essence number is, which I'm not going to go again too far into the numerology, but had he made it to the end of September 77, he would have started a 5 essence period with a material consciousness of 11, which is the most spiritual number in numerology, the 11. And so yeah, he definitely would have taken on a more spiritual consciousness throughout the next year or so. So that about wraps it up. I hope you did enjoy it, and it is kind of long, and you know, I hope you enjoyed it, you know, and I hope I get better at talking in these videos, because I'm not very good at it right now. Take care.